We should discuss Reductio ad Absurdum. Right? I looked it up. You know what the phrase means? To the absurd. Yeah. Okay, so it's a rhetorical method of argumentation, right?
Not necessarily reducing, but yes.
No, that's what's called. That's what I'm just literally the Latin translates to. It's showing that an argument leads to absurd conclusions. Right. Then that's
absurd
yeah. And halacha, by the way, I discusses this a few times. It doesn't use that word. I looked it up. For example, Wikipedia doesn't have this article in Hebrew. Wonder, all the other usual Latin things like modus tollens and modus ponens and ad hominem, right? The rest of them, you could find all sorts of things like that. Yes, produce the body. I tried to coin a few to describe halachic ideas. Once you have this, like you explain, like this is fallacious because it's just an example of, X, Y, and Z. It makes it a lot easier. So that's why I was using these. And one of the arguments that Chazal allude to is reductio ad absurdum. For example, the whole thing, it used to be there were Jews in Maccabean times who felt that one may not make war on Shabbos, and a community may not wage war on Shabbos, or even defensive war. War is against Shabbos. And what did that lead to?
War.
It meant to people losing wars. It means that enemies would massacre Jews on Shabbos. And then they realized, perhaps the halacha does allow for this. There is quite a lot in the Talmud. It's a section of Shulchan Aruch. The pikuach nefesh doche Shabbos, right? Why do they have to tell you that? Shouldn't that be obvious? And the answer is, well, technically speaking, no. There are certain mitzvahs where your life is less important than the principle. The principle is more important, correct? So give me an example. When is your life less important than the principle of the matter? Well, Vodazara, Shvichus Damim, Gila Rayos. So those take precedence. Everything else, Shabbos, though, violates Shabbos. Your life takes precedence over Shabbos. And that's even a lot. They have to give an a logical argument. Why? Or violate Shabbos on behalf of someone else. It's a chiddush that I violate Shabbos on behalf of someone else. Why do I violate Shabbos on behalf of someone else? Violate one Shabbos now so that he can benefit from many more keeping Shabboses in the future. That's what the Talmud says. No, you give your life. You would give your life rather than kill.
Rather than murder.
Yeah, murder. Yeah. No, if it was equal, you have that would make a rodave case. When it's equal, let the best man win. That's how we paskin. Yeah, but if you have a chance, let the best man win. Every man for himself. Yeah, so you can do it if you have a mutual redifa going on. The Rambam's abortion case. Okay, once the child has gotten to a certain state of being born, he's considered a life. So it's either him or the mom. You're not allowed to intervene, whichever one wins. Yeah. So, but from their point of view, from the mother's point of view, she's trying to win. From the fetus's point of view, he's trying to win. You're not allowed to intervene because Shaveh, but from the mother's point of view, she wins. She could do whatever she can. If she's capable, she can perform the abortion on herself or do something to alleviate this. Yes, because they're rodafing each other. Yeah. It's surprising, right?
Like if someone says to the mother, if you don't kill your baby, I'm going to kill you. She's not allowed to kill the baby.
No, once he's born, because the baby's not doing anything to her. The guy with the gun is the rodave.
Oh, but she's a holder.
Yeah. Okay. When you have certain situations where if it's equal, so every man for himself. Which is why on the Titanic, the whole idea of women and children first is not a Jewish one. That's a Christian, that's an Anglican idea. It's not ours. Okay. On the Titanic, it's every man for himself, and everyone else is a rodave. You can if someone's not in the lifeboat yet, two men vying for the lifeboat, they can push and shove, even take out a pistol. Because the other guy trying to prevent you. Isn't that wild? Yeah. So if there's a beis din trying to determine who to save, okay, if there's someone else, a third party, talking about just the parties themselves are all in danger, then it's every man for himself. You're talking about when there's a third party who Chas v'Shalom has to make the determination of who to save.
Yeah, like the people
Yeah.
who are in charge of who says that women whoever says that women and children.
You know, because I gave the Titanic example because at the beginning they said women and children first. They thought they had time. They thought there was a certain amount of lifeboats. But then everything, all Seder broke down. It was just like that was the captain declared, every man for himself. Then he killed himself. Yeah. Okay, enough with that. So why did I bring this up? Because there's priorities. We are now realizing now that many different halachic arguments that were new, we tried to describe them on, let's say, Tuesday night. They were against what Chazal said. That whole thing with ransoming captives. If you would just follow what the Chazal, assuming even a state is allowed to ransom, even if we assume that, what conclusion has it led to? Those who have come up with all sorts of newfangled ideas for why it is the IDF or an Israeli government can surrender so much for single captives, the Shalit deal, and all the other terrible deals that happen. There's rabbinic backing for such a thing, despite the fact that it's against an explicit Mishnah, right? What does it lead to? It leads to the absurd situation where they've managed not only to go against the Mishnah, they say any price, redeem any Jewish captive at any price, no matter how big the price, and no matter what the consequences of that price. If it was just giving them gold and silver, then you'd be done with them, but you incentivize them to do it again. Here you're releasing murderers who are saying, they're declaring their intention to do it again. It's led us to an absurd place. And there are many other examples. I should have written them out. I was busy walking. But Chazal recognized this, that if halacha, an idea, leads you to an absurd nafkamina, then it obviously cannot be true. Okay? I mean, that leads us somewhere that it cannot be. And that's what I was trying to explain in trying to explain in Hebrew earlier this week, and I wasn't getting the point across. The words don't exist in modern Hebrew. But the Mishnah Berurah alludes to such an idea. Okay? The Mishnah Berurah itself brings up this question in the Ber Halacha, which we are going to read forthwith, to show that the position that I was arguing is alluded to. The Gra brings up this position, but the Gra dismisses it because it's a Reductio ad Absurdum. What was I talking about? Do you remember?
On Tuesday?
Yeah.
Wasn't there?
Okay, so let's do it outside very quickly. Bein Hashmashos is suffix time. Okay, because not suffix mina yom, suffix mina laila, right? So you'd imagine that for halachas d'oraisa l'chumra, halachas d'rabanan l'kula. So there's all sorts of things. Shabbos, for example, comes time to keep Shabbos during Bein Hashmashos at both ends of Shabbos, at the beginning and at the end. So you can't do malacha during Bein Hashmashos, right? And then we saw this idea, but whatever the sages instituted because of Shavuot doesn't apply during Bein Hashmashos. Okay? If there's a Gzera d'Rabbanan, and the Rambam points out, and we saw the Mefarshim who explain this, if there's an exceptional need for a mitzvah purpose, or because of Dochak, which is a very big open door, but still, there are many rabbinic enactments regarding Shabbos that do not apply during Bein Hashmashos, right? That's the Mishnaic rule. And we use this to show that Rabbi Yossi is the one who says that Bein Hashmashos is infinitely short. Okay, he says it's like clarifying. An Adam can't even measure it, right? Well known. Whereas Rabbi Yehuda is saying no, it's the usual Bein Hashmashos what the Rambam goes with. Okay, now just outside, the Rambam basically says, despite all the intricacies involving the various opinions within the Tanaim, how long Bein Hashmashos is and when it is, relative to the sunset and the stars coming out, the Rambam basically says that we've concluded, after all this, that Bein Hashmashos is from sundown until the stars come out, which is about just less than 20 minutes. What?
For the layman.
Yeah, for the layman. That's the operative rule. And for D'Rabbanan, you're Makel, and for D'Oraisa, you're Machmir. Okay? For rabbinic issues, we are Makel during that time. And that's what we were saying all along. That's a simple way of understanding it. And we saw that there's a pilpul in there that I put in big letters, Nohagu, regarding fast days. What was it? The sages told us that fast days like Tisha B'Av, Sfeikon Aser, during the suffix time, that's Bein Hashmashos, it's still forbidden. Forbidden to do what you would normally do, not on Tisha B'Av, right? So what's forbidden on Tisha B'Av? Eating and drinking, right? Yeah, but the main thing is eating and drinking, right? So the Gemara says, Sfeikon Aser for Tisha B'Av. So that means The implication is the other fast days, Sveikon, Mutter. Okay? That's how the way the Rambam and the Rishonim understood it. That's what you could find Tosfos. That's the way it was generally understood. Yet, they tell you you're fasting, even on Sarbat Teves, you're fasting until Tseis. So the Shulchan Aruch has its own explanation why involving Rabbeinu Tam. The Vilna Gaon doesn't go into Rabbeinu Tam. Rabbeinu Tam, we don't hold like him. However, he brings what the Mordechai says. In Achinami means indeed. On the other fast days, Sveikon Mutter, we've given you a kula. Unlike Tisha B'Av, where you have to fast during the Suffolk time, during the other fast days, we'll give you a heter to eat during the Suffolk time. Okay? When's the Suffolk time on all the other fast days? There's no Ben Hashmashis at the beginning of the fast days because the fast days start in the morning. We're talking about the Ben Hashmashis at the end, the Suffolk. Okay? That's the only nafkamina. But then the Mordechai says, and the Vilna Gaon has his own way of explaining this, Trei kule lo mikilinon. Indeed, we gave you Ben Hashmashis to eat, but because there's various opinions about when Ben Hashmashis is, that itself is a Suffolk, you want to take Rabbi Yehuda's Ben Hashmashis, the one that starts at sundown and goes for another 20 minutes or so. You want to eat already at sundown. But Rabbi Yossi's Ben Hashmashis is only after Rabbi Yehuda's. Basically, a little bit right after, instantaneous. So you have to be machmir for Rabbi Yossi's Ben Hashmashis. You can eat during Ben Hashmashis, but not only during Rabbi Yossi's Ben Hashmashis. Because Trei Kule Lo Mikalinon. By the way, Trei Kule Lo Mikalinon is not a phrase from the Talmud. It's reminiscent. Someone tried to show me, isn't there a thing in the Gemara, Trei Kole? No, Trei Kole, Shnei Kolot, Lo Mishtamae. You can't hear two voices at the same time. It's like, they're talking over each other. That's a Talmudic expression. Trei Kule Lo Mikalinon first occurs in the later rabbinic literature. So
would you want to argue by that every machloket in the Gemara, then any place where a posek, like a Mekel opinion, you have to be choshesh to the machmir?
Yeah. So that's part of the absurd conclusion. Now, I wanted to show, basically, that there are Mishnayos and Eruvin that give a kula. Okay? Rabbi Yehuda Nasi's kula, which is the rabbinic enactments do not apply during the Nishmashis, is the mechanism that is used to explain why kulas exist in other Mishnayos. Okay? Why do you have this leeway to do with your Eruv and taking the Eruv in the Carmelis or taking the Eruv out of the tree, which would normally be forbidden on Shabbos by rabbinic law? Why do you have a dispensation to do this during Ben Hashmashis? The answer is because Rabbi Yehuda Nasi has a rule: rabbinic enactments are set aside during Ben Hashmashis. Okay? So I use this as an example to show that if the Mishnah itself, where it talks about the child born during Ben Hashmashis in Shabbos, okay, child born during Ben Hashmashis, his bris is, we assume he was born the following day, not the day that's outgoing. Except if he's born as Shabbos is coming in which case we can't bris him on Shabbos because it's a suffix. We'll have to wait until Sunday for the bris. Now, this is assuming this happens all the time. There are many children born at the various hospitals in Jerusalem every time Shabbos is coming in. There's always a handful of children born in Jerusalem, Ben Hashmashis, at least according to the general, the Maimonidean 20-minute Ben Hashmashis, right? Or the Vilna Gaon sort of 15-minute Ben Hashmashis, which is a significant amount of time. And their birth certificates indicate this. Or they say when the child's head first came out, whatever it might be. So children are born during Ben Hashmashis. If we held like Rabbi Yossi, what would he do with all these Mishnayos? Rabbi Yossi says Ben Hashmashis is functionally not there. It's an instant, right? He says no Adam can comprehend it. So what are these Mishnayos talking about? There are no children for which this would be a nafkamina. There's no Eruvin for which this would be a nafkamina, right? So how does Rabbi Yossi, ask them, how does Rabbi Yossi deal with this Mishnah? These Mishnayos are halacha. They do not fit. They cannot be resolved with Rabbi Yossi's opinion. So someone went to say, no, we take in Rabbi Yossi's opinion, so you have to be machmir for his definition of Ben Hashmashis only in the machmir side. And that's where the Mishnah Berurah comes in, because of this Trei Kuli Lo Mikilinon. The Mishnah Berurah asks something that you should have, like you yourself were getting at. The argument was, the Vilna Gaon said, they're machmir for fast days, will let you eat during Ben Hashmashis, but only during Rabbi Yossi's Ben Hashmashis, which is well after Rabbi Yehuda's Ben Hashmashis. Basically, if I look at the clock, okay, let's say Shavasar B'Tammuz and Tisha B'Av were on the same day of the solar year, so they would have the same zmanim. Okay, Tisha B'Av, it tells you fast is over at 6. 20 minutes after sundown. Shavasar B'Tammuz, its fast is over at Ben Hashmashos, but yet be machmir for the Ben Hashmashos, which basically is 20 minutes after sundown. So there's no nafka mina what time the fasts are over. That is what I was trying to point out is absurd, because the sages specifically gave you the opportunity to eat during Ben Hashmashos for those fast days. But this argument that Trei Kule Lo Mikalinon erases that as a halachic option. It leads to the absurd conclusion that all the fast days end at 6, even though the sages specifically told us that not all fast days end at the same time. That's
Also, how would someone who makes that argument explain the even in the Gemara where they bring a bunch of opinions for when's one Kriyat Shema is? The Gemara's like, Kovim Divrei Shemim.
Yeah.
In that case, it's a Deraita. And it's like, it's close enough.
So, but you see that we get into all these different contradictions. That's where the absurdum works. So there's a very important Mishnah Berurah, which I will now share, which some of us were seeing now. I'm sorry if this sounds like a rerun. Thanks to Safari, I didn't know they had Be'er Halacha here. I'm going to read it as it appears in this one. Why? Because this one has dots and punctuation. It's great. Whereas the Safaria one is full of shorthand and all sorts of other things that I don't enjoy. Remember, we'd said on Tuesday or Monday, Rav Tzuriel said, you're going to print a book, no Aramaic, no Rashi Tevos, nothing ambiguous. Put in commas and periods, vowelize what you need to, and no Aramaic. Even if it's a quote from the Gemara, if you have to quote the Gemara, translate it into Hebrew. Okay, make it easy on people. Why should you Why should you make your sefer a closed book? So here's what it said, and like I said, this idea that you can enjoy Eruvin. Another issue that came up was Ben Hashmashos. When Rabbi Yehuda Nasi gave this dispensation, the rabbinic enactments do not apply during Ben Hashmashos. Was he talking about just the beginning of Shabbos, or also at the end of Shabbos? Because there's two Ben Hashmashos involved. So the Gemara was talking about getting the Eruv out of the tree at the beginning of Shabbos. But the mechanism, the allowance for this, the explanation, Rabbi Yehuda Nasi's statement wasn't necessarily connected to this Eruv case at the beginning of Shabbos. He just says it generally. And the way Rashi understands it seems to be, generally speaking, both Ben Hashmashos. And I pointed out, Rabbeinu Yonah says, one example is asking the Gentile fellow to light the candles for you. So most people are familiar with nowadays, candle lighting is a ceremony that starts Shabbos. But you forget, before they had electricity, most places, you are indoors, you have to close windows if it's windy or cold outside. Even as Shabbos is coming to an end, you're waiting maybe for sundown, now you have another half hour of Shabbos to go, you have another reason to ask the Gentile to please light some candles for you. And Rabbeinu Yonah says, you could ask Gentile to light the candles for you. He didn't say at the beginning of Shabbos. And the Rambam sticks this halacha in Hilchos Shabbos in what he generally refers to, just general rules of Shabbos. And the Rambam says right before that, the rules of someone who's machshicha l'tchum, which means someone who needs to get somewhere after Shabbos or be at the edge, at the field on Shabbos. So he makes sure to get as close as he can to the edge of town or wherever he may go on Shabbos so that he can get right to work as Shabbos gets out. What's the Rambam referring to there? How a person behaves towards the end of Shabbos, how far he can go. Because you would have said, there's what to say that. The Rambam was saying, daber davar, and you shouldn't even walk like you do on the weekday, on Shabbos. Shabbos, you got to be different. So you would have room to say, it is forbidden for a person just to leave his house and hang out near the edges of the fields so that he can get where he has to go right after Shabbos. But there is a dispensation. The Rambam is talking about dispensations as Shabbos is leaving. And then the Rambam says, and any gzeira that the sages made, any enactment regarding Shabbos doesn't apply during Ben Hashmashos. So there are many contexts where one would have applied this rule to both. The Magen Avraham is the first one to say explicitly, and he lived in the 17th century. Perhaps this rule is only an allowance as Shabbos is beginning, but not the Shabbos ends. But then he points out, the Mishnah Berurah brings, there are many who argued against this. It seems pretty clear that this dispensation applies both at the beginning and at the end of Shabbos. Because the Gemara's case, when the Gemara was analyzing this, it was talking about a person who needs to access his Eruv as Shabbos is coming in. So that's what the Gemara was talking about.
Well, functionally, what's the difference between Censorship when Charles is coming into it?
I don't know. That's what I'm trying to say. If Rabbi Yonasi says Ben Hashmashos, these things are mutter, and as he said as a general rule, he said there's no chiluk. Right? We cannot just introduce. Oh yeah, that rule only applies. That prohibition is limited. We're limiting the prohibition, or we are limiting the permission given. Right? That's a very big step. I'm against that in all cases, and I cited a few examples of things which I even got into arguments. Even with Rabbi Bar-Hayim was arguing this, that if the sages said something, a later Rishon could give a good argument why that rule is limited, but there might not be any basis for that in the Talmud. Okay? The biggest one was, the Vilna Gaon says it really clearly, the prohibition of eating matzah on Erev Pesach is all day. There's Rishonim already on the Rambam who say, maybe that prohibition is only limited to the time once the chametz becomes prohibited also. So they limit this prohibition. Rabbi Bar-Hayim liked that one. He had a shir about it. And I didn't like it because there's no Talmudic basis for such a thing. And also because Havamina, when they said it, you can't do this, they meant it. They give an example. The person who eats the matzah on Erev Pesach is consorting with his betrothed before the wedding. Okay? That's the way the Vilna Gaon understands. That's what Yerushalmi says. Okay? So, it doesn't really make sense. Now with all this in mind, I'll read you what the Mishnah Berurah says here, where the Mishnah Berurah is basically saying that, well, we got to the Trei Kule Lomikalinon. I'll say it outside. This, if what we said regarding fast days is true, that we'll let you eat during Ben Hashmashis, we'll give you that because the sages gave you that, but we're not going to give you the Ben Hashmashis of Rabbi Yehuda. We'll have to give you the Machmir Ben Hashmashis, which basically erases. Okay, this. But people hold like that. Here's the thing. You read. It's a really long Vilna Gaon. Most people don't read through the end. I think the Mishnah Berurah himself was relying on others because the Vilna Gaon makes this argument, but he first introduces it after saying the Ikra din is this, and there's a minog that they're more machmir for this. And later in the Mishnah Berurah, he gives you two arguments. Later in the Bar Groi, he gives you two arguments against it. Okay, this Trei Kuli Lo Mikalinon. I don't know why. It's like people don't read that part. So there are things in the Mishnah Berurah that are good, things in the Mishnah Berurah are disagreeable. I brought up this case in Eruvin and Shabbos to show that the Trei Kuli Lo Mikalinon is, we don't hold by it. Why? We don't hold of it because this is a dispensation that Chazal gave us. The rabbinic enactments are permissible, and during Ben Hashmashis. So you should say, well, fine, you could do these things during Ben Hashmashis, but you have to be machmir for Rabbi Yossi's Ben Hashmashis. We're not giving you any time to actually do it. See? That's a great. That'd be. You understand where this goes? So I'll read you what the Mishnah Berurah says. He basically says this. So I said it as a way of saying Reductio ad Absurdum. So it must be we're off track here. But the Mishnah Berurah says it seriously. What does the Mishnah Berurah say? Okay. Ayin le'el b'siman reish samich aleph. Just want to get this, make sure that people see this on the screen also. Here, for those of you looking, it's right here at this word. Look back to Mark 2:61. That's what we've been discussing until now. This is in Mark Shin Mem Bet, which is 342. Okay? It says the most amazing thing. Hold on, I lost it here.
Chazalic.
Hold on, I lost it. What?
Chazalic version of the statement be the end of the book. So,
what do you mean? In the Dover Sof. Yeah, in the Dover Sof also means so you gotta pick a wife, a backup wife for the Kohen Gadol, and other things. That's an example also. Yeah. Lo shavak t'chai l'choberia. Yeah, that's lo shavak t'chai l'choberia. People can't live with a thing like this. Yeah. Yeah, they say it in other places. Okay. Ayin le'el siman reish samech alach the Vior Halacha shenista paknu. In the Bar Halacha there we had a little bit of a suffix. Dinehi shanu mikilin b'shvutim ben hashmashos. He says shavutim instead of shavotim. Okay, it should be with the cholam. Okay, we have we do let people have a kula. We are lenient with regards to the rabbinic enactments during Ben Hashmashos. Man Yomar, who would say shanu nakel trei kuloth b'hadei adadi, that will also have another kula, two kulas. We'll take here it goes, because we just had a rule trei kulei lo mekalina. Shenit post Rabbi Yehuda the achar shkiyahu Ben Hashmashos, that we'd say, well, you could do your rabbinic enactments. You can violate your rabbinic enactments, but we'll use Rabbi Yehuda's Ben Hashmashos, okay, the lenient Ben Hashmashos. V'achar kach nispos Rabbi the lo gazru az al shvuz. First, we'll be lenient. We'll pick Rabbi Yehuda's Ben Hashmashos, the long Ben Hashmashos, the familiar one, and we'll be lenient like Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, who said that the rabbinic enactments do not apply then. That's two kulas.
I don't understand how it's a kula if it's just a halacha.
That's what the Rambam would say. The Rambam says the halacha is Ben Hashmashos. We already came to that conclusion, and we said Ben Hashmashos one big suffix, and therefore we already said certain fasts you can eat during Ben Hashmashos and certain fasts you can't. That's a very Maimonidean way, but this is a way. This is the Mordechai's way. That says for some reason, like a fellow asked me the other night, where do we get this Trei Kulei Lo Mikalinon? I don't know. It's not a Talmudic rule. Okay. Dilma Lo Mikalinon b'Motzei Shabbos Elo Ben Hashmashos Rabbi Yossi. Maybe at the tail end, Ben Hashmashos, you could hold like Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, L'Kula, but you also have to observe Rabbi Yossi's instant late Ben Hashmashos, which means that you don't really have any time to actually use the Kula. Aval Halomi Kodem Sphere Le Rabbi Yossi Yom Vadaihu, which means that everything before Rabbi Yossi's Ben Hashmashos is certainly daytime. Everything that first 20 minutes after the sunset is still 100% Shabbos. So you can't invoke Rabbi Yehuda Nasi's, ask the guy to turn on lights for you until basically Shabbos is over anyways. It says in the Gemara in Shabbos, okay? Didn't it say in the Gemara Shabbos that Mezal L'Chumra? Yes, that was talking about Malacha on Shabbos. It's talking about Malacha on Shabbos. Isser D'Oraisa, and eating Truma, which is Halacha D'Oraisa. Someone said, yeah, but the Truma is D'Rabbanan, so maybe we're machmir for eating the Truma also at a certain time. No, what Rabbi Yochanan said was applying to all Truma. A kohen can only Truma after he's dunked in the mikvah and the stars came out afterwards. Harif Shemesh. Then he can eat then he's fully pure, and then he can eat his Truma. When the sages enacted Truma D'Rabbanan, they didn't change the rules. They said, act toward Truma D'Rabbanan like you would Truma D'Oraisa. L'chadchila. Okay? That way they don't forget this type of thing. While feeling on Truma D'Rabbanan, he says, even Truma D'Rabbanan, yes, Truma D'Rabbanan, there was no exception made. The Kohanim are to treat Truma D'Rabbanan, Second Temple times, just like they treated Truma D'Oraisa. Gemoshe Kasva Tosvos Sham, Uchein Masha Kasav Agra, Va Korban Nisano. Remember, Gra and Korban Nisano said what? What? Le'inyan Tainus. That thing of Tainus. Trei Kulei Lo Mikalinon. Right? Yeah, we'll let you eat during Ben Hashmashos, but we're not going to give you the more lenient form of Ben Hashmashos. You have to have the Machmir Rabbi Yossi Ben Hashmashos. Okay? V'ulai de Shvusim Kila Mizeh V'tzarchim. Maybe Shvusim, the rabbinic enactments, are treated more leniently than the Tainus. V'tzarchim. Tzarchim is a way of saying, I really don't know. Okay? Tzarchim is, let's be Machmir. And that's what the Mishnah Berurah concludes. Therefore, you should just be Machmir for everything, like the Mishnah Berurah usually is. But you see, the Mishnah Berurah got to this point where he found the ad absurdum, that we know you're supposed to give people a chance during Ben Hashmashos to keep kulas, but that means we have to give them the instant late Ben Hashmashos, which basically nullifies the enactment, which is the proof that the Vilna Gaon never held of such a thing, Trei Kulei Lo Mikalinon, because it leads you to get to these conclusions that are impossible. Okay, so there you go. Well, let's talk about something else, just like general interest. Remember last year, what did we say? What does Rashi say? Ushlalam lavos. What is it? Where's it from? What's that line? Ushlalam lavos. Yeah, what does it mean? So the original Haman enactment was free for all, killing the Jews and all their property. Whoever first finders keepers, whoever takes it, right? That was part of the terrible thing. Haman was basically hung just a few days after it. Thank God, right? He issued this order, and probably by the time, shortly after, people imagine 2 weeks later hear about this in some far-flung province. They hear enactment, and just a few days later, and Haman was killed. The guy who initiated this whole thing, he's already been hung. And just a few weeks after that, there's another enactment. You can't take back the first one. The Jews can defend themselves. And what does it say about the Jews' enemies? Also, the Jews can take the spoils. Ushlalam lavos. But Rashi says that uva biza lo shelchu yadam. on both days of fighting, the Jews did not take any of their enemies' property. Why didn't they take their enemies' property? That's what they're plotting to do then. Their enemies were plotting to kill them and take their property, but the Jews fought back. This was a good trick. It was like a Maoist trick. See who speaks up and starts sharpening his sword, getting ready for the massacre of the Jews. Then the Jews know who to kill. It's great. It's kind of funny nowadays. The Jews know exactly who their enemies are. They even have big parades, brandishing their guns and declaring their intent to kill the Jews. Yet the Jews don't do anything about it. Very strange. If I were, I don't know, don't you know anybody who pilots a helicopter gunship? A Jewish hero would be the first guy to get in a helicopter gunship, if we have such a thing, and find one of these big demonstrations wherever they happen, and just have a little fun. Yeah, he might be tried by 12, but he'd be saving a lot of Jews from being carried by 6, right? Okay. Anyways, so Rashi has his reasons given there that they didn't want to offend Achashverosh too much. Maybe Esther was able to convince Achashverosh, give me another day. Let me tell my people to continue the fighting back another day, right? It's because Achashverosh didn't see the Jews acting greedy. And the fact is they ain't touching it. So it says Vabi Zalo Shulchu Yadam. But in practice they didn't. Rashi is explaining why they didn't. It's very not addressed by the Mefarshim why they didn't take it. So last year we discussed that technically speaking, you're allowed to take spoils even from Amalekites and Canaanites, right? Ikar Adin, spoils from Canaanites. It was a one-time order from God through the Navi that Saul could not take any spoils. That was a chiddush. Even destroy the animals. Why? Because even from Canaanites and Amalekites, of whom everybody has to be destroyed, the spoils are a gift of God to you. You get to take their houses and everything they had. And it says in a few places that King David took spoils from the Amalekites and dedicated them to the temple, just like he took from all the other enemies. Yeah, guys. Okay? That's what he did. It was a chiddush. It's not a general halacha that you can't take spoils from them. That's why the Rambam doesn't mention such a thing. By the way, they ask, why does the Rambam mention Purim Shulash? Because according to the Rambam, when Purim is on Shabbos, like it's going to be next week in many places, they're going to read the Megillah on Friday, but they're going to have their Purim Suda on Shabbos. And Sunday is not going to be Purim Suda. No, Rishonim will held that way. Yeah.
What would be the reason not to?
What? Because Yerushalmi says when Purim is on Shabbos, you have the meal the next day. The Rambam didn't hold like Yerushalmi. Maybe he didn't have it. Okay? So it's a good question. Everybody holds like Yerushalmi. Why they do it? For a while, it was for a few centuries. There was no real places where Jews kept Shushan Purim as a matter of course. They just forgotten. And then finally, you have a Jewish community in Jerusalem, so that's what they started doing, like this Yerushalmi, because there are Rishonim who bring it, like the Rif. Okay, there's always been a Rishonim, but apparently the Rambam didn't have this, even though he would have. It's explicit in Yerushalmi. The Vilna Gaon points it out. Others do. The Pri Chadash we're going to discuss soon says you should be machmir and have Purim Suda on both days.
You have to have a specific Purim Suda.
So that's the reason the Yerushalmi says you do your Purim Suda on Sunday is because Purim Suda on Shabbos, there's no hecker that it's a Purim Suda. It's a Shabbos Suda. On Shabbos you have many Sudas. Purim Suda is one Suda by day. Shabbos you have one Suda at night and 2 by day. So where's the hecker that it's Purim?
Oh, man, everyone's getting drunk.
Okay, well people do you drink wine on Shabbos also. Okay? So you're not supposed to get that drunk on Shabbos, Not supposed to get that drunk on Purim. So yeah. What were we saying here? So after discussions today, Dr. England had a video that came out today, and it made me realize what is cherem. Sometimes the Jewish people have a decision that they make to fight a Amalek. They tell God, "We're going to not take any spoils. We're going to thoroughly destroy these people, and all the possessions will be as though an offering to God." Where did Joshua do this?
No.
Jericho,
Yeah.
Jericho. That was they're going to take everything from the Canaanites. It's a mitzvah in the Torah to take what the Canaanites had, take possession, even of their non-kosher food. They were eating pork. You inherit their house full of pork. You can eat it. Yeah, that's the absurd example that Chazal say. That's what the Torah permitted for the soldiers. It's a question. The Ramban limits this, but the Rambam has his own limitations, how they limit it. But the pashtus is, you take over the enemy's house, you could eat everything in the fridge, right? I know, because the electricity had been out for a while. But they used to hang. Why did Chazal say they'd find, pig's feet? It means like sausages. type of stuff that didn't need
You
refrigeration.
did find packages of sealed UN pasta, though.
Oh, the UN food? Was it cooked pasta or is it
No, it's
dry?
raw pasta. You could make.
Okay,
But my
it's probably
friend asked
kosher.
one of the rabbis at yeshiva and said they have kosher food.
Well, it probably is kosher. It's a vegetarian food taken from Kutzlar. It's
No, it
uncooked.
didn't have a hechsher.
Didn't have hechsher. So, but even if it didn't have hechsher, the Chazal said you could eat the pig, and here the rabbi is telling you to be machmir for not eating dry noodles. I tell you, they're more firmer than Moses. What's the question? You have to check for bugs. It's ironic if the goyim had pickled bugs, okay, if they had like shrimp and lobster and crabs, those are all basically gigantic water bugs. If they had that cooking in their house and you conquered them, you'd be able to eat that. You could eat bugs because the Torah permitted the non-kosher food in their houses when you take over their houses. So Chazal said even the pork, so you could eat the seafood that they have in their house. Yeah? You missed your opportunity.
Well, I mean,
Okay.
Arabs got pork, so
I know, but maybe they had seafood. The Arabs eat seafood.
I have no desire to eat seafood.
I know, neither do I. They're gigantic water bugs. Why don't anybody want to eat it? Shrimp. You know what shrimp is? People like shrimp. How could you eat this stuff? Thank God we've advanced. Well, okay, but the Torah allows you to eat grasshoppers. You know, there's a.
I mean, I wouldn't have to worry about kosher pans that I take from them.
No,
As in, if I use them in
that you do have to. Once you take them home, you have to
I'm
kosher
not
them.
taking them home. I
Gilu,
use pans out.
the whole din of koshering pans is learned from the pots and pans they took from the Goyim in war.
No, but I didn't take it out of war.
Yeah,
When
so
I'm in the
when you're in the house, you're eating his tray food. But once you take the pots, the halacha is you have to take it. You can't say, well, it has tray food. You have to kosher the pot.
No, but if I leave it in the battlefield, use it in the battlefield, I don't have to.
Yeah, probably not. Okay, so let's continue this. Where are we saying? So after reading about this, I realized no, the whole point of cherem is what? To show that you're doing it l'shem shemayim. Sometimes God orders the cherem, and sometimes Am Yisrael, as part of God help us out, will make this a cherem just to show that we're doing this l'shem shemayim. So when the Jews didn't take spoils from their enemies, not that you can't say that they're Amalekim, so you're not allowed to take spoils from them, because not every single Jew hater scattered throughout the Persian Empire as it was then was an Amalekite. That's an impossibility. It's more than that. It's that the Jews chose not to take any of the spoils to show that they're doing this l'shem shemayim. Okay? Jews don't take spoils to show that it's l'shem shemayim. Make a cherem of it. It's similar to the practice of sometimes imposing a fast on the soldiers, like Saul did. He did it right the first time, right? Or like David pouring out the water. The men endangered their lives to obtain this. Said no one could drink it. The water's holy. So he poured it out as though it's like a libation, right? And other examples in history. So that's why they didn't take the spoils. It was a way of showing we're doing this l'shem shemayim and God is on our side. Or it could have very well been that they'd taken a vow, we'll make all their possessions cherem, but it wasn't included in the Megillah. Why? What's left out of the Megillah? The Megillah was written under censorship. So what's the most critical thing? Like the most obvious omission from the Megillah, the way we have it? God, right? It says, Esther told Mordechai, gather all the Jews and fast for me. And don't eat and don't drink. 3 days. I'm also going to fast 3 days. Does it say gather everybody? Where? In the synagogues. It doesn't say that. And pray. Oh, it doesn't say that. That's in the Targumim and in the uncensored versions, the complete versions of the Megillah that the Jews still held on to that aren't the official version. So, yeah, they're versions in Aramaic that have all the missing pieces.
So you're saying Targum is an uncensored version of the Megillah? Yeah,
there's Targum that are uncensored. Okay, so now you have to go read it. So there's prayer involved. There was prayer. The idea of prayer, they'll set the central. Let's starve yourself for 3 days and go for it. They're praying. That says kinos. Kinos means, why do they call it a shul? What's a shul? The real word for a shul, Beit Knesset. That's what it meant. Okay, so that's left out. Or how they thank God. The words of praise and the songs they sang afterwards are omitted from the Megillah, but we have a record of them. So too, the whole thing that the Jewish people said, we are going to not take these spoils. We're telling God, grant us victory over our enemies, and we will, not touch the spoils. That part was left out because that's a promise to God. It's like a form of prayer. Okay?
Is there a canon Targum?
There's some.
By Chazal?
No. On the Ksuvim, there is no canon Targum. Okay? Even on Tehillim, there's no canon. There's only canon Targum, Oklus on the Torah, and Targum Yonasan on the Nevi'im. Even what they call, as you know, the Yonasan on the Torah is not Yonasan, it's not canon.
Targum is a quote-unquote uncensored version of the...
Because the sages discuss it. In Midrashim of the sages, they say more, they fill in the blanks. They tell you that was written, this was written under Achashverosh's eye, or at least his literate scribes. I don't know, was Achashverosh literate? Yeah. Yeah. Maybe he wasn't. Who knows? Okay. So there you go. Okay. How come it's censored? Because Achashverosh was a Rasha who worshipped idols and was very finicky. Just like one day his prime minister bribes him and says, "Can I kill your Jews?" And he was totally fine with that. And the next day, because he's very much infatuated with the beautiful Jewish woman, he'll overturn everything else. He could have switched on, he killed his favorite wife because one of his advisors told him to. The Gemara says, Achashverosh was the guy who killed his wife because his friend told him to, and then killed his friend because his wife told him to. Okay? What would make it that the next day, his friend will tell him to kill his wife? Right? That's what the Gemara says. No, sorry, it's the Medrash. Medrash Hester points that out. Okay? So, he had it censored. Don't forget, Achashverosh did worse. When he first took the throne, he put a halt to the building of the Beis HaMikdash. And that's not a Medrash. That's what it's described in Sefer Ezra. That's why he made such a big party. Right? And even though things were good afterwards, the Jewish people survived, the whole building of the Beis HaMikdash was still put on hold until when? Achashverosh was, thank God, dead. Right? They couldn't go ahead with that. Ad Chatzia Malchus. Right? There's certain things I won't give you, Esther. I'll give you everything. Why did he give Esther everything he wanted? Do you think he had such a good relationship with her? Like, they had some sort of deep thing that she actually liked him? She was all bizochet to such a thing. But it was mostly just a straight, animal infatuation he had with this poor woman. It was terrible. Her situation before Mordechai said, maybe this is the reason why this happened to you. It was just tragic what happened to her. So, that's why I did it. Okay. So we said also similar. We should have asked this 2 years ago. We talked about the Kruvim. Last week's parsha says they're supposed to have an Ark of the Covenant, and there's no mitzvah to build an Ark of the Covenant because there's no new luchos. So in Second Temple they didn't have it. But the Rambam says in Mor Nevuchim, what? Yeah, the Rambam Mor Nevuchim says the presence of 2 Kruvim on the Ark has a certain theological function to teach people a certain necessary truth. That's why Solomon made new Kruvim. He made gigantic ones out of wood covered in gold, right? This is being recorded anyway, so you have to record it. And in the Second Temple, they replaced the Kruvim with what? They didn't have gigantic statue-like ones in the Holy of Holies. They had them engraved on the wall. The wall was overlaid with wood, and they engraved the Kruvim into the wall, so they had certain 3D-ness to them, and it was coated with gold. That's what existed in the Second Temple. That's why you could have, rabbinic accounts of what the Roman conquerors discovered when they destroyed the place, why they saw the Kruvim. They saw the Second Temple ones, the ones that they used to show to the people, open up the parochas wide on the holidays. So all the temples had Kruvim. Kruvim were made 3 times in history, 3 pairs, right? That's the Rambam. We should have asked, so why is it the Rambam doesn't say in Hilchos Beis Bechira that part of the construction is to make some form of Kruvim in the Holy of Holies? Yeah. Maybe, but it's just like, it should be the type of thing that sages would have told you you have to do it. Or maybe, I would think that perhaps the idea what I was getting at is maybe folk Judaism, it's saying that we're already beyond that. Like the Rambam says, like an idea. Eventually, Rav Kook expounded this, eventually the people get even beyond Korbanos. Yeah, of course you have to do it, but eventually people will get beyond it. So this is also a sign. Like the Navi already said, people got beyond the Ark of the Covenant. Now we just have Sefer Torah. We don't need it. Navi says it twice. We don't need this. It's the type of thing that eventually we won't need this idea. But I don't know. I also was scandalized by something. Someone took out, right before Torah reading, on Shabbos, a siddur. I couldn't find in most of those, even those Sephardic siddurs, but his siddur had it. Yeshem Yichud Kusha Brichu Hinu Nimuchu Mizuman. For what? To be said right before reading Parsha Shkalim. Right? So, that makes sense. You're about to do a mitzvah. For every mitzvah, even mitzvahs are abundant, they have this. But there he said, we're reading this Zecher to Machatzitza Shekel. Zecher of the Hachraza, the announcements, everybody give half shekels toward the temple, right? And I told him I stopped this guy. What? Just because something's in the siddur doesn't mean it's holy. Okay? The sages gave us Shmona Esrei and Brachos. Most of the things in the siddur are much later. That's just liturgy. It's not holy, right? You don't know who wrote it. The Rambam was very much against a lot of Piyutim, for example. So whoever wrote this, the Shem Yuchad Kutcha Brichu Hine Nimuchu Mezuman, was unaware of what it says in the Talmud. Rav and Shmuel talk about the reading of Shkalim in Maseches Megillah. And like we pointed out last week, the reading of Parsha Shkalim as existed in the temple is the same thing we do today. It's one enactment. You're supposed to read Shkalim as Adar is approaching, or on Rosh Chodesh Adar. And that reading of Shkalim is the announcement that the Mishnah in Shkalim is talking about. When it says, Mashmim al Shkalim, according to the Gemara of Machlokas, Rav and Shmuel, that the reading of Shkalim that we did in the synagogue is the announcement. Which brings to the funny case that we still announce people, give your Shkalim, even though there is no mitzvah to give Shkalim because the temple is not standing. So what we did on Shabbos is not a Zecher, it is the actual thing. It is the original enactment. It's not Zecher of the enactment. And it's not Zecher l'machatzitza shekel. It's actually what the Mishnah Berurah says is Zikaron, which means it's a reminder, give your half shekels. When you say Zecher, it's like we're doing something now that's different than the original ritual, so we will not forget the original ritual. What is the Zecher, for example? People give half a shekel to some sort of something. Where are you supposed to give your half shekels, by the way? Or 3 half shekels. To Machon Mikdash, yeah. But that's Zecher l'machatzitza shekel. But the reading of Shkalim is and always was the same thing. And that is the Hashma that the Mishnah talked about. I told him, whatever you're reading out of the siddur is wrong. What are you going to do? It's like, are you a mechanic? Remember? Yeah. He's not a mechanic of Judaism, and obviously I'm not a mechanic. And it's in the siddur. You read it. You say it. You pray to God. Remember Rabbi Olbaum? He must have heard this somewhere else. He said that this is until he discovered. I was there on Rosh Hashanah. He said Rabbi Olbaum found in the Machzer that good old Jebus, Sonny Boy, is mentioned in some editions, including Art Scroll, Machzer for Rosh Hashanah. The prayer for it to be said between the Tekiyas. Some obvious Sabbatean or whoever inserted something that's ridiculous in there. But, it's in there, so, you say it, Oh, look, there's text. Pages and pages of text. I have to say all of it. Say the Tehillim 7 times. Okay, I have to say it. At least that was made by people who were tzaddikim. But other prayers are, dubious. Like, what is this? Words you can only look at with your eyes, but you can't say them. Who said such a thing?